um, for the Intermountain region and the Pacific West region. So we are going to be doing lots of sessions, joint sessions, so that we are all kind of getting the same information and we're not having to repeat these sessions. We also are recording these, so I know that schedules don't always match up, and so we want to try to accommodate as many people as we can. So these sessions are being recorded, and you will have access to share the recording with your peers, your colleagues. So I am Stephanie Snow. I am a national organizer for NTEU. I have been working with the Pacific West region parks to start the organizing efforts and start gathering those 1187s. And I also have my colleague here tonight. So Lee, would you like to introduce yourself now?
Sure. Hey, folks, I'm Lee Fisher. I'm also an organizer within TEU. I've been working with the Intermountain region, and I'll be joining us again later in this presentation.
Thank you. Okay, well, we're going to cover quite a bit of ground tonight. We're going to give you a little background on NTEU, who we are, what we do. We're basically kind of call this the union basics, just giving you sort of the basic information, letting you know what your rights are in terms of organizing, some information about the process, and a lot of other just basic information that's good to know as we begin gathering our signatures and organizing our unions in our regions. So I'll get started here. Let me just give you a little bit of info about NTEU. We are the National Treasury Employees Union, and I'll give you a little more information about that on the next couple of slides, where our name originated and how NTEU was born. But we represent about 150,000 employees in 38 different agencies across the federal government. We have more than 200 local chapters, and those include DOI staff, thousands of DOI employees. We have chapters at NPS WASO. We have chapter 336 is our National Capital Region chapter. And then also within DOI, we represent the Bureau of Land Management in several locations and we are continuing to organize Bureau of Land Management employees as we can. NTEU is an independent union, meaning that we do not fall under the AFL-CIO, the federation, a larger federation. We work independently, which means that we can choose to represent exclusively federal employees. So all of our chapters are federal employee chapters, and we focus solely on the concerns of federal workers and the federal workplace. We're headquartered in DC, but we have 7 field offices around the country so that we can have staff that are near to you in your region and can provide you services at the ready. So our field offices we have a field office in DC along with our headquarters, but we also have field offices in Atlanta and Denver. We have Hoboken, New Jersey, Austin, Texas, Oakland, and Chicago. So we have attorneys that staff all of those field offices, and each of our chapters is assigned one of those attorneys. We call them assistant counsels or field reps. So continuing on talking about our staff, as I said, we have teams of attorneys in all of those field offices as well as in our DC headquarters. And they represent our members. They work with our chapters one-on-one to make sure that our members are getting what they need in terms of representation. And we also have attorneys who bargain contracts. And so those assistant counsels help with contracts, but we also have a very talented negotiations department that works on our national contracts and advises on chapter negotiations as well. We have organizers such as myself and Lee, and we have two other colleagues that do the organizing work for NTEU. And so we have there are two duties, I guess, within NTEU. One of them is external organizing, like we're doing with NPS, with you. And external organizing just means forming new chapters, so helping you to organize um, and take that to an election so that you can have a certified chapter through NTEU. The second part of our job is to work with our already established chapters to help them build power through engaging their members, recruiting members, increasing visibility, lots of different things. And so, that's the two functions that the organizers serve within NTEU. We have a very good team of lobbyists on Capitol Hill that are always, out working and talking with your legislators and pushing forward the agenda for federal workers and trying to sway our lawmakers to support legislation that supports the federal worker. And we also have a public relations department that works with our existing chapters to help them increase their visibility through their communications. And the PR department also produces our national level communications and things. So our members, we have a little bit of a different structure. We have a chapter-based structure, and each chapter has a direct connection to the national president, the national NTEU president, and also each chapter has an attorney, an assistant counsel who is assigned to work with them. We provide our members with training opportunities to increase visibility, capacity, increase the chapter's ability to grow, and also train our members to advocate for the people in their chapter. So we train stewards, we provide local trainings to train stewards. We have a national convention. We have national conferences every year where our members can come and learn about all the many things that they may need to know in order to be good advocates for our members. And then also we have an annual legislative conference where our members can come to DC, and actually we set them up with appointments with their legislators so that our chapter members can raise your voice all the way up to the decision makers on Capitol Hill. Next slide. Our mission, as I said before, we only organize federal employees, federal workers. And so our mission is to organize federal workers to work together to ensure that every federal employee is treated with dignity and respect. We're certainly working that mission every day, especially with this administration that we're working with right now. And so that's very important to NTEU that we not only defend you, but help you to build your power so that we can raise the federal voice and make sure that you are respected and the work that you do is respected, the work that you do for our country. Our priorities, protecting the nonpartisan civil service. We are constantly advocating for agency funding and again, always advocating for better pay and benefits for federal workers. So let's talk for a minute about your rights in the workplace. So, you have the background now of NTEU a little bit, but what does all of that mean, and what does it mean in terms of your ability to proceed forward on this organizing effort? So just a little more history. NTEU, our first chapter was created in 1936, and it was created by a group of IRS workers who were facing a lot of challenges. And at that time, they did not have collective bargaining rights, and they did not have the civil service protections that we have today. And so that very much was an organizing culture then. They had to, at that point in time, every employee had to be involved with the effort to organize. Every employee had to help push that agenda forward. They needed every single worker on board, and they were able to do that. And that's why our name is the National Treasury Employees Union, because at that time we originated with IRS workers, and so that makes sense. Now, since that time, as I mentioned earlier, we've expanded to 38 different agencies and departments, and so we cover way more than IRS workers at this time. So just kind of the history of federal unions. So things kind of pretty much stayed in that sort of organizing mode all the way up until the 1960s. And so it was really about building power, getting everyone on board to sort of move your agenda. And then in 1962, there was an executive order issued by President Kennedy that 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 legitimized, I guess, what the employees had already done in forming unions, and allowed federal employees to choose labor organizations if they wanted that for representation. Um, that was expanded in 1969 by an executive order from President Nixon. And then finally, in 1978, we had the Civil Service Reform Act. And within that Civil Service Reform Act, the Federal Service Labor Management Relations statute was formed. And we'll be talking about, we call it the statute for short, and we'll be getting into that in the next couple of slides. So the statute, the Federal Service Labor Management Relations Statute, it's a mouthful, basically found that labor organizations and collective bargaining is within the federal workforce, or the civil service, is in the public's best interest. And so it laid out some structure around that. It did state that we believe that federal labor unions within the civil service safeguard the public interest and contributes to the effective conduct of public business, and also facilitates better labor management relationships. And so within that statute, if you'll move forward, there we now have parameters around what employees can do and what management may or may not do. So basically, employees have the right to form a union, join a union, or assist in organizing a labor union. Or you have the option to refrain from any of those activities, and you should not have to fear any penalty or reprisal for either participating in union activity or refraining from union activity. So to boil that down, more specifically, what you can do under the law in terms of this campaign, you are allowed to sign a membership form, or as we call them, an SF 1187. You can circulate and discuss those membership forms with your colleagues, either on site or off the work site during non-duty hours. You may have organizing conversations with your coworkers as long as those are also on non-duty hours. And you can also ask them to join the union or fill out the 1187 form. And then finally, you have the right to vote in a secret ballot election that will be directed by the Federal Labor Relations Authority. Now, management basically through this whole process is supposed to remain neutral. And so, under the statute, they may not restrain or coerce employees in terms of how they're exercising their right to organize. They are not supposed to encourage or discourage you in any way, shape, or form. And they also are not permitted to discipline or discriminate or retaliate in any way. So they're just basically supposed to stay neutral. They can provide information to clarify procedures and processes, that sort of thing. They can encourage you to vote. They just can't encourage you to vote yes or vote no. So they can encourage you to exercise your rights. They can and are in fact required to publicize the details of that an election is happening and the details of that election. And those are required to be posted publicly. As I said before, they're allowed to correct any misinformation that maybe has been communicated. And then they are allowed to just keep you informed on the agency or the government's policy in regards to labor management relations. So to know if you're eligible to join a union, you can go to your SF50 and look in box 37. And if your business code there has 47, so 7777, that means that you are eligible to form a union, to join a union. If it has 8888, that would indicate that you would be excluded from a bargaining unit, and we'll get into that in a minute. But if there's another number there, and I think we have some parks that at one time may have been represented by other unions. At some point, maybe that union is defunct or whatever. But each union has its own code in that on the SF50. And so if there's a number other than 7777 or 8888, then you can contact us and we can look into what that number means for you. But I did want to talk a minute about the folks who are excluded. So people who would be indicated by 8888. Typically, we say, this would be your management and supervisors are not eligible to be part of the bargaining unit. And so here's just a little more information, kind of breaking that down even further. So a supervisor is defined by the FLRA as someone who has the autonomy to hire, fire, discipline, direct your work, do evaluations, and or approve leave in terms of bargaining unit employees. So a supervisor will often be included in manager meetings and upper level meetings. And so that is the official sort of definition of a supervisor. Now, I know that there's a lot of gray area within that. And we have case by case kind of situations where people are maybe defined as a supervisor, but not really supervising people at the moment or something like that. And so we just kind of take those case by case and see if do some research and see where they fall in this. And sometimes people are coded incorrectly. That just happens. Or they were in a supervisor role and they're not any longer, but they haven't changed the code. So if you run across things like that, just reach out to us and we'll look into it for you. Some of the other excluded people would be a management official. So that's someone who would be, higher than a supervisor and is in a position that requires or authorizes them to def determine policy or create policy within the agency. Confidentials are people who they a lot of times this might be kind of like an administrative assistant or somebody like that who interacts with a management official and has exposure and input into creating those management policies and has a role within labor management relations. And then finally, employees who are engaged in security work. So intelligence, counterintelligence, things that affect our national security, they would be excluded as well. So I'm going to take a pause right here. I have at least one person from the Pacific West region who wanted to just kind of jump on and talk about why they have jumped on board with the union. And so if you are on this call, if Nick is on this call, I'm going to give you a second to jump on.
I'm gonna try. I have bad service. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, you can. I'm at Joshua Tree. We have all kinds of different ways our employees are treated at Joshua Tree. I'll say. Like there's been a lot of turmoil, and managers are working on like solving the problems of keeping the park open and keeping things functioning. And so they're solving problems by moving employees around, and that's created a lot of turmoil for our folks. And that's sort of like we want to we want to have a union because we want to empower our people on the ground to have a say in those conversations. And like it's fine to solve problems and work together, but we need to be working on it with the folks on the ground and not the doing things unilaterally. I think there's a lot of different kinds of concerns, things from like um, uh, uh, the on-call pay for folks that are on call and not getting compensated for that. I think that's a big concern that's been raised. And just a variety, like the way furloughs are scheduled, things like that, that the agency has policies they're supposed to be adhering to, and they are often not because it's difficult to solve problems while you're adhering to, while you're respecting your employees. And so we just want to, advocate for those, have the power locally to advocate for those folks. And why we're working with NTEU is because we looked around, we shopped around and tried to work with different unions, and it became really clear really rapidly that NTEU was the best union to work with, that they are most engaged with us. They really like from the start said like, hey, I've always wanted to unite with the Park Service, and we've just had a lot of support, as you can see from Stephanie and Lee, from you into we have local folks that are really like working with NTEU and all the legal support that provides and all the way that NTEU is engaged with local folks on the ground and supporting those local resources. I just also want to give a shout out to like how this effort has grown. I just think it's been a really fantastic support from just a huge number of parks across Pacific West region. And you'll hear also the same thing from Intermountain region. But we have 22 parks signed on right now. Our bargaining unit eligible, climbing up to like 1,300 eligible folks. We have 150, close to 160 right now signed on. Uh, and our first vote is going to happen when we get to like 600 or 700 eligible employees. And so we need half of that. So we need about 300. So just looking at that, about 40% of the way to the the number of people who've signed on that we need to have, which is really awesome progress that we've made, and it's really exciting to see new parks come on and join this. It's been a big movement in the Park Service right now, and I'm really excited to see everyone engaged with it.
Thank you so much, Nick. And Lee, I guess I'm going to hand it to you now.
All right. Let me change some settings here. Okay, sweet. So I'm really excited. We're going to talk about the what are the benefits? Why are people joining a union? Why should you form a union? And how do we do it? So let's jump into it. So obviously, I mean, you hear about a union, you hear about a union contract, your collective bargaining agreement, um, which is going to become such an important document alongside of kind of side agreements that we negotiate as well, around everything from your leave to work schedules to how to health and safety, to housing to seasonals, all kinds of things that we can negotiate in a contract. I'll talk a little bit more about those on following screens. Um, Another thing that we negotiate in a contract is an ability to resolve problems. We negotiate a grievance procedure that we work internally with the agency to try to resolve problems at the lowest level possible, but leaving open that sometimes we actually have to go directly to a park, a region, or a national level, depending on what the issue is. And knowing that we ultimately can head to binding arbitration to resolve those disputes if we can't resolve it between ourselves and the agency, so that we know that we can put faith in building a good case, and putting that before a third party decider. Um, so our contract is one thing, piece of this that you will, your members together. This is a benefit of being a member, someone who signs that 1187. Members will come together and fill out surveys, hold meetings, and form a bargaining committee who actually gets to sit at that table directly across from NPS management to negotiate that contract. And our members get to have that voice, and that committee will, after each session, take back what progress we've made and get input from the members on where we're moving for with the contract. And ultimately, the members, the people who have signed that 1187, get to vote on that contract. Um, and so that contract we usually lasts about 3 to 5 years, kind of depending on a wide variety of factors determine what length, but that contract gets renegotiated in intervals, and we build upon each time what we have, we make it stronger, and we go back each time to our membership to continue to make sure that it's reflecting what the voice of the membership currently is. In doing that, and all of the other work in building the union, we end up developing something more than just an association. We develop real community, where we can increase morale of how people feel about showing up each day because they feel that they actually, one, have a voice in the work and how it's being decided. They feel like they are connected more to their colleagues, and that the labor management relationship has improved as we work to resolve problems together as a team. Altogether, this helps us create a much more inclusive environment where people really can be heard and seen. Another thing that helps us build power is our collective bargaining agreement is not the one time where we get to negotiate over things that impact your work life. We actually, throughout the all in between contracts, we have what's known as midterm bargaining, which is basically any bargaining that comes up in between the large negotiations. Any change that management wants to make to your working conditions or terms of employment have to be negotiated with the union first. And this actually starts from the moment that you're certified as a union. So after you win your union election, even before you have a contract, essentially things get frozen in place, all of the policies and all of your working conditions. And if NPS wants to change them, they have to come to the union and negotiate over those before they make those changes. And that's over any working conditions in terms of employment. There are going to be a few things that are outside of working conditions and terms of employment that fall under what are known as management's rights. But even in those instances, we actually still have the power to negotiate over what's known as the impact and implementation of those changes. A example is I remember I was working with some parks in the National Capital Region, and management said they wanted to install some security cameras for loss prevention. And we said, okay, well, that was something that they had the right to do under management's rights, but we got to negotiate over how that impacted employees. So we got the schematics of where they proposed to have those security cameras. And it turned out when we looked at them, some of them were facing at the employee entrance and employee break rooms and restrooms. And so we were able to push back and say, hey, is this actually surveillance of employees, or is this about, they were arguing it was loss prevention from visitors, that they weren't trying to target employees because there was no reason or evidence that there was employee theft. And so that was something that we were able to push back on. They still got to install those cameras, but they weren't in locations that were detrimental to employee privacy. Um, so, more issues. What are things that we can negotiate over? Things that we have been hearing in the parks, in the various regions, from your ability to have flexible scheduling options. So many positions that were eligible or adapted during the pandemic to telework or remote work are still should be eligible for that same work. Increasing uniform allowances, making sure that in general that there's transparency and fairness in the parks and in park sites, but in promotions, in evaluations, making sure that employees know what expectations are and what the either consequences or rewards are in really clear and equitable ways. Making sure that there's clarity on what those opportunities are for upward mobility. Health and safety is a wide range of things these days, but it's really what you all determine are the important issues at that time. I think we all know right now the work that federal employees are doing to hold the line and protect agency missions, and the work that you all do that's so integral and so important. That's important to NTEU as well. And we frequently partner with obviously with our members, but even with agencies to give testimony to Congress about the importance of the work that you do, increasing resources for that, lobbying on behalf of the agency for increased staffing so that you can do the work that you need to do. Being able to be a voice really for employees and protecting that mission. Obviously, I don't know how many seasonals are joining us today, but we would not be able to talk about the Park Service without talking about seasonal employees. Well, it turns out that NTEU, we actually have been representing seasonal employees at another agency since almost our creation at the IRS. We've worked for decades to develop a professional program for employees to come back year after year and accrue benefits and have stability for themselves, but also for those full-time employees who are there year round, who know that they can count on those employees, those seasonals who do come back year after year, that you can build out that stability for all of you. And another relevant topic I know that folks are really feeling the pressure of right now are RIFs, reductions in force. When you have the protections of a union, you have the ability to be represented in one, trying to prevent rifts, but where they are going to happen, being able to negotiate over all areas that we can by law negotiate. And this is a wide range of things that we can negotiate in terms of delaying, reducing, mitigating, how a rift might roll out, who it might impact, whether people do get various voluntary options to separate. And what sort of separation packages those look like. All of that, whether it's moving into other positions, having a union to represent you, making sure that the agency is actually following the statutory procedures for RIFs. In these days, right now, that isn't necessarily something that we can count on, that the agencies are going to follow the law. So making sure that you have representation there. And then if employees believe that they are separated illegally, having representation at MSPB, the Merit Systems Protection Board, or if we have a grievance procedure, there are multiple ways that unions and our partner organizations are looking at representing federal employees in their separations right now. So one more piece on the issues that matter to park employees. These are actually some of the wins that our National Capital Region and WASO have had over the past years, from securing thousands of dollars for back pay for legal schedule changes. This is something that is common in a lot of our agencies, whether it's schedule changes or not applying overtime properly, being able to make sure that we actually secure that money that people worked really hard for and get that back into employees' pockets, including unpaid transit subsidies. As well as I don't think it's even here, but oh no, it is obtaining awards parity between bargaining unit employees and management, but also being able to advocate for more transparency and increased funding of awards. Um, uh, Uniform allowances, making sure that employees have access to the uniforms that they need to continue to show up. Also on health and safety, we've worked twice now to close down the Washington Monument in the National Capital Region due to safety issues, and then advocating to make sure that those repairs were made and were done in a way that was safe for the employees who had to continue in the future to go up into the monument. Making sure that we are creating a equitable workplace that's fair, by making sure that managers treat employees with dignity, with fairness, with respect, and not with racism. The Park Service has been held accountable. There was one case where a supervisor was removed. There have been other cases where we've been able to, in other ways, hold supervisors accountable for their actions. Um, and protecting the work that so many parks employees do in scientific research and preserving the stories and the history in your parks and making sure that employees have advice on what their rights are, whether it's around protecting information or whistleblowing, making sure that employees know what their options are, what representation is available, and that the union has their back. So, one of the most common questions when we're talking about a union is going to be, okay, but what about the dues? And we don't want to shy away from talking about dues because dues are how your organization runs. And I'm proud to say that our dues have not gone up in over 30 years because our members vote every 2 years at our convention on our dues structure. And this dues structure has continued to work for our members because it is set up in a way that if you make more, you pay more. And if you make less, you pay less. And so we don't have to keep adjusting for various raises or changes in COLAs because this adjusts with us and creates a fair system. The way this works is that's essentially a multiplier there. So if you find your wage for your step in grade, or you know your wage for your step in grade, and you apply that multiplier to that for your base pay for every 2 weeks. If you don't want to do the math and you're like, okay, well, has someone already figured this out for me? You can look at a sample dues chart at nteu.org/NPS. Off to the right hand side on that website, there's a couple of different links, and there's a sample dues chart that actually does have the calculations there to start to give you an idea. But generally, between 12 and $26 per every 2 weeks, every pay period. Dues will not begin until after we have gotten through a successful election and your membership has voted on your bylaws because our chapters actually get to vote on what their chapter dues are going to be. This is the calculation for our national dues. A lot of our chapters usually vote around 15%, if you're wondering what that would additionally be. But that's up to the chapter. So your members get to vote on that in your bylaws. So it's many months after a successful election that dues would actually start being withheld, and you would have advance notice of that. Your dues go to making your organization run. It means paying for the staff of the union. It means making sure that right now you all get to have food at meetings and get to have resources to share with your colleagues about building a union. That's other people's dues that are funding this right now because that's an investment in building our union. Your chapter will be able to hold various functions, hire or pay the fees for arbitrators if you ever have to take cases to arbitration, and be the resources to accomplish what you believe your chapter, your union needs to be doing to meet the needs of its members. And that may look like a wide range of things, but ultimately it's our members who decide. So we've talked about all of these great things about who NTEU is, what your rights are, what you're fighting for to win with a union. How do we get there? Well, we've got a little roadmap here. Right now, we are in in the top row, that fourth box of signing 1187s. People from various parks have reached out to us. We've been developing and organizing committees at the region level and at the park level or site level. And those people on the organizing committee are working with the organizers to assess the support here. And as we're hearing, as we're seeing the 1187s grow, we are seeing that there is support for building a strong union for NPS employees. And so that's where we're building to. What we're trying to get to is 50% of eligible employees. By law, the Federal Labor Relations Authority, which is the third party agency that handles labor relations in the federal sector, in the private sector, you may have heard of the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board. They're kind of sister organizations, very similar and have many similar regulations. So by law, we have to have 30%, a showing of interest that people want to have a union or a union election. We have to show that at least 30% of eligible people want that. We hold ourselves to the standard of 50% for a few reasons. One, just through attrition, we want to make sure that we meet that 30%. So we want to overshoot so that we meet that minimum threshold. But beyond that, we want to win the election. And we want to win big. And so we know that if we at least have the support of 50%, that even if every single person voted in the election, which is rare, that we would win that election. And then past that, as you see in this roadmap, once we get through an election, we're going into contract negotiations and we want to be strong. We don't want to be, if we walk into negotiations with only 30% support and membership, while management is not looking at every single 1187 and who joined, when we go into negotiations, if we've submitted 1187s for dues processing, they are going to know how many. What is our strength, our percentage? How much of the bargaining unit do we actually represent? Can we say that we have a voice for? 30% means 70% is happy with status quo, and that really reduces our leverage. And so we want to make sure that 50% is really our minimum. We want to go above that to have as much leverage and strength when we walk into those contract negotiations as possible. And so we get to 50%, we file for an election. It usually takes between 2 to 5 months for us to get to that from the point of filing to actually holding an election. Elections are usually done in a hybrid method where you get the information mailed to you at your home, but you vote by phone or internet. That usually lasts for about 4 weeks so that there's time for people to receive that information in the mail and be able to vote or request a new ballot if they don't receive theirs. After that, if we win a simple majority, just 50% plus one of the people who vote, not the total number of people eligible, but the total number of people who cast a vote. If we win that simple majority, then we win. And your union is certified 5 business days after that election. And we go into building your chapter and preparing for contract negotiations. All right, so as I talked about, we are building an organizing committee. So the next steps here is if you want to have a strong union and you want to make sure that this is successful, join your organizing committee. Reach out to myself, or if folks from the park want to drop into the chat, who folks can reach out to. You can reach out to the organizing committee or Stephanie or myself, and we'll get you plugged in. It's about 1 to 2 hours a week. Some weeks, maybe it's zero because you have so much going on. We want people to show up in their capacity, but this is urgent. We need to move as quickly as possible so that you all can secure those protections and have that representation. And that we can hit that 50% to trigger that election. You don't have to have any experience in building a union or being involved in any organization like this. We will help you grow and provide training and support you alongside with your organizing committee. It's also a really great way to meet other people in your park, at your work site, to really get to know who you're working with. A lot of folks end up building a whole new set of friends. Um, So I want to make sure we have time for questions at the end, but I want to make sure folks understand how to sign the 1187 and what that is. So as we've talked about that 1187, we've talked about it for filing for the election, but it is a dual purpose form. You're not only signing saying that you want to have an election, but you're also saying that you're committing to becoming a dues paying member of the union, because that's how you're going to have a strong union that has the resources to actually negotiate for the things that matter. As I mentioned earlier, dues aren't going to begin until much later, and you'll be notified ahead of time. And no one knows that you signed this 1187 except for the NTEU organizers, and the organizing committee so that we can continue to build out and meet our goals. But no one from the agency, until we get through a successful election and submit those for dues processing, and in those cases, it only is going to payroll, not to each individual park. No one is going to see them. In addition to that, no one will also know that you voted. That's also part of the secret election. We encourage you to be public in your support, and to tell people that you've signed your 1187. And that actually, in many ways, gives you more protections from retaliation. If you are public with your support. But we're not going to tell folks about your support. Um, so I encourage everybody, if you haven't signed your 1187, you can go to nteu.org/NPS, or scan the QR code if you are on a laptop and able to just scan that with your phone. That'll take you right to the 1187. Um, if you go to the Submit an 1187 here link, it's going to prompt you to enter your email. You're then going to enter your personal email, and that should almost instantly send an email with a link directly to the 1187. Don't worry about box number 3, but all of the asterisk boxes we need you to fill out. In agency name, just to help us out, you can put NPS, put what region you're in, and then your park or your site name. The 4-letter acronym works great for us. And then your contact information at the bottom. I encourage you to check that box that authorizes us to send text messages. We're not going to be sending you a bunch of text messages now throughout the campaign, but when we get to the election, that will enable us to be able to reach out to you and remind you about the election, and as we move forward about major things that are impacting park employees, to get that rapid response network going. You'll get a copy, and we'll know instantly if you get it. So if you ever want to confirm, feel free to reach out to Stephanie or myself, and we can let you know generally in real time if we've received your 1187. All right. Well, we've got a few minutes, hopefully, and if folks can stay on, we can hang around for a little bit longer to take live questions here, or in the chat. But also, if you want to reach out to us directly, or if your park isn't currently involved yet and you want to figure out how to get involved, you can reach out to myself if you're in the IMR, or to Stephanie if you're in the PWR. Either by phone or email, text, call. We look forward to talking with you and helping you build a strong union for Parks employees. All right, with that, I'm gonna check in on the chat. I've been seeing it go here. Uh, and let's see. Stephanie, if you've seen questions, feel free to hop in and start answering as I catch up.
Um, I'm answering one question. I was kind of in the middle of typing. Um,
Okay,
so
well, here, let's see. We've
somebody,
got a question.
yeah, somebody
Um,
asked about people who are uncomfortable putting their social security number. So I was typing that the last 4 digits is fine, but also our forms are protected with military grade encryption. And so their information is safe.
awesome. Michelle, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, just had a quick question. We were in a meeting last night with somebody from Yosemite. They're about to move towards their election with Neffy. They said that because as of like early July, they were protected from rifts because they were going to go into their election. The FLRA recognized them and they're going to do their vote. We're trying to figure out if that's true. Like the minute your election bid gets accepted, that you are protected from rifts.
So, not explicitly, but often in practice, would be my short answer to that. So, there's kind of four stages of how your rights expand throughout the campaign. You have the rights right now to organize free of reprisal. Once we file for the election, your rights expand a little bit in that the agency is encouraged not to do anything that could impact the outcome of the election, that could sway employees, like offering buyouts,
Mhm.
or potentially impact the actual bargaining unit that the union has filed an election for, like a major RIF. And so, in effect, generally, agencies, once a union files for an election, agencies generally pause any changes that they can to that bargaining unit. Once we get through the election, even before we negotiate a contract, from that moment you're certified, then all policies and everything freezes, and all changes have to be negotiated through the union for working conditions and terms of employment. And then once you negotiate a contract, obviously your rights expand even more. So I'm not going to say that I can't explicitly say that yes, NPS would absolutely, you would be protected from rifts from the point that we file, but in practice, that's generally how it has gone.
Okay, that's perfect. That's a great explanation because we were just trying to figure out, we want to kind of blast that message a little farther and wider, but we just wanted to understand it. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question on the nuance there. Other questions that we haven't gotten to in the chat?
There was one question just about seasonals that has come up,
Yeah.
and how seasonals count toward the bargaining unit and the vote and all of that. And so, if you want to take that, Lee, you can, or I will, either
Yeah,
one.
yeah. I'm happy to take it. So I don't have a clear-cut answer for you on how seasonals are going to impact the election, but here's how it goes. We have 2 points when eligibility comes into play. At the point that we file for the election, when the FLRA is making sure that we hit that 30%, they're going to ask the NPS for a list of all eligible employees in that region that we're filing for, or within the parks and sites that we're filing for. The agency again doesn't get to see our 1187s, but the FLRA is going to determine if we've hit 30%. That number, or that list that the agency sends, will include any seasonals at that time. So it is possible that we file for an election with potentially still summer seasonals, and then it takes us a couple of months to get to an election. And now we're in the winter season, and some of those summer seasonals aren't there anymore. Before the election, the NPS will produce another list of who's now currently employed, and that will be our voting eligible list. And so it is possible that we'll have new seasonals working in that time that weren't even part of the original campaign. And so I say that to say it is in our best interest to have urgency to move this campaign as quickly as possible, to maximize our time with the current seasonals that are involved right now. Let me see if there was something else about Oh, how can you persuade them when such a short time? Well, first off, to the point I just made, it's possible that someone could sign their 1187, help us meet the threshold for the election, and then not actually be around when we get to the election or when we get to processing dues. And it might not be until their next season that they come back to a unionized park. They're not going to pay dues if they're not working, since those dues are connected to their paycheck. And so I would say to seasonals that this is our ability. Getting to an election and winning an election allows us to create a framework to create some real structure and stability for seasonals in the future. This is a long-term plan here that we're working on. We have that has multiple stages, and that even if the seasonals won't be around to vote, that maybe they'll be back next season and can benefit from the work that they started. Uh,
Um, see what we've missed here.
and feel free to raise your hand if you have a question that hasn't been answered or a new question. Law enforcement. We do represent multiple law enforcement employees in the Capital Region. We represent the law enforcement officers there. We represent CBP and FLETC. There's a wide range of issues from making sure that there's time for fitness and mental health, but also making sure that law enforcement employees have access to representation if they get involved in a situation that they have potential liability in, as well as making sure that if there are issues that are just specific to them, that we can negotiate around. I'm going to give a little bit more of a general answer. A lot of times people are worried that a union contract is going to be so broad or only apply to some specific employees. Our contract can be really nuanced in that we can have language that covers all employees, or we can have language that covers just specific employees, just specific types of employees, or different regions of employees, based off of those specific needs. And so sometimes we have separate agreements that just apply to law enforcement employees, and making sure that they have the resources they need, that they have the support that they need, and the staffing and time to take care of themselves, as well as additional access to products through insurance and other providers for union members, similar to what other law enforcement agencies or associations provide, that we can provide access to those as well.
And then
Um,
I would just add to that
yeah.
and the difference between the union doing those things and an association doing those things is that our contract is legal and binding. And so, it just provides that extra enforcement to the things that we bargain.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's see how smaller parks or groups of parks might try to form a union versus the region-wide effort. Um, uh, do you want to take it, Steph, or do you want me to?
I mean, we have decided to organize regionally, and in the initial phases of this, when we're going to file for petition as quickly as we can with the parks that we can. So the parks that we can get there to get our numbers, we'll file. But then as other parks that maybe come online later, we can file elections for specific parks to be added to the initial union that's certified. And so, if a park it doesn't jump on the effort right away or doesn't know about it right away or whatever, and we go ahead and we get that initial certification, we do what we call add-on elections, and we've done this with Bureau of Land Management in several places where we get an initial unit and then we file add-ons. And I think the benefit of that and organizing regionally is that you'll have consistency across the region and from park to park in procedures that are outlined in your contract. And so you won't, if you're a union represented park and you go to another union represented park, unionized park, then you will know that the contract is the same, the framework is the same, and management is held to the same level of accountability, and that you have the same level of recourse in terms of filing grievances and that sort of thing. Now, Lee mentioned earlier that we can customize for different groups and things like that, but having the regional overall contract provides the overall framework, and then we can, as Lee mentioned, negotiate those nuances as we need to by park or by job category, whatever it is. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Lee.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would add is that I would encourage you to think about whether it's the right thing to do, because this is how we build solidarity. The alternative to doing it regionally and doing it by park or by site means that some of the small sites then have to go into negotiating a contract with very little resources compared to a Grand Canyon or a Mount Rainier. And so we want to make sure that we are building out one. I mean, thinking about just like capacity of the NTEU, the union staff who work to negotiate these contracts and the ability to go negotiate multiple contracts, but also bringing all of our power together so that those larger parks can help supplement and support smaller parks and vice versa.
Someone brought up the executive order, the exclusions executive order, or attempts to strip away the collective bargaining rights and how that plays into this in our timeline. I would say that the quicker that we can get you to an election and get you certified, then that offers you not only more protections, but also provides other avenues for NTEU to fight those things. And so, in places where we represent folks in an agency, we're not only attacking those exclusions through lawsuits, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, but also then we have other avenues, mass grievances, appealing to different places, so that you would have more means, I guess, or more avenues um, to challenge it uh, if at some point there's an executive order that tries to strip your bargaining rights away from you as NPS employees.
Yeah, I mean, everything that Stephanie said, like this is just why we have urgency right now and why we want to move faster. But also, I would say why we want to do this in a way that moves quickly and as under the radar as possible, so that we can get to the point of the election without any potential interference and secure those additional protections. And then get to a point where NTEU can devote additional resources should something like that happen to include NPS in all of our lawsuits. I see a question about, does each park need to meet the threshold? Uh, and that's not specific. So, as Stephanie explained, our goal is to file for as large a number of parks and sites within each region separately, IMR and PWR, as possible within our first kind of phase of this campaign. Each of those parks needs to be hitting their 50% so that we can move forward with that overall 50%, and then to file for the election. After that, as Stephanie mentioned, we can then add on each park. Each park to be added on would need to hit that 50% to file for the election and then win the election with the 50% of the votes.
Yeah, there was a question early on about retaliation. I think we just never have circled back around to that. So the
Oh,
question was about the potential for retaliation from the administration for signing 1187s. Um, I don't know if you want to jump into that, Lee, or I will, either one.
you can take it. I can add anything.
Yeah, so I mean, with the administration now, it's hard to tell what they will do. As Lee mentioned earlier, at some point, you're almost more protected if you are vocal about being part of the union because as we showed you earlier in the slide, your right to do this is guaranteed by law. And so, if there's a case of retaliation, blatant retaliation, we will challenge that. We will file a ULP, we'll file law, whatever we have to do to challenge that and
NTP, okay?
protect your right to do this under the law. So that's my, I guess, best answer to that is it is in fact illegal and we take it very seriously. And we'll pursue that with any administration, but particularly with this one. I know that there is fear around that. And there is an advantage to being part of the union community in that you're not doing this alone. You're not going it alone. You're not just out there at the whims of management or the administration, but they'd have to target a whole group of people if that's what they were intending to do is in terms of retaliating for that 1187. Whereas if you're kind of going it alone, then they could single people out and that sort of thing. So, we're building a community of people. We're building common ground and building power. There's more power in numbers. It's much harder to discipline or retaliate a large group of people than it is a single individual. Do you have anything to add, Lee?
I loved everything that you said about how we're building community and that you're not going at this alone. To further highlight that, look, our union has experience representing agencies that aren't well liked, that get targeted. There was a time when the IRS was being targeted for being accused of going after specific Republican funds and businesses. And there were specific employees that were actually being targeted, as well as a couple of our other agencies like the CFPB, and FTC, when employees specifically get targeted, we actually have the ability to represent them, not just as a union member, but as an individual, to make sure that if anything ever did happen, that you have the best protection possible.
And that protection extends to the process of organizing. Again, you are protected while you're organizing, you're protected under the statute. And so we would pursue any interferences or any retaliation to an individual or to a group during the process of organizing. Any other, I think we've hit most of the questions.
Yeah, I was trying to scroll, make sure that I didn't miss any, but if we did, please feel free to highlight them for us or come off of mute. Uh, Again, if you have not signed your 1187, I encourage you to do that. If you've already signed your 1187, I encourage you to reach out to at least one person that you work with and tell them that you came to this meeting and what you thought about it, and encourage them to sign their 1187 as well. With everything that we've talked about tonight, I think the theme here is urgency. There's a lot of fear about what could happen. The quicker we can get to an election, the more protections we are able to secure, and then be able to fight for. And so it is going to take every single one of us talking to as many people as possible to build a strong and representative union. So
We're
let's
often
see.
asked, how long does this process take? And, it can take as long as you want it to take. I mean, we have organized groups that have gotten most of their signatures within 2 weeks, and then we've organized groups that it's taken much longer. And so, as Lee said, this sense of urgency is now. And we can make this happen quickly if we can get out there talking to people and get people on board and signing those 1187s. A lot of people are interested and they say they'll sign. And so it's even following up with people and just making sure that they follow through and do the 1187. And we can see the numbers starting to roll in. I had 15 1187s come in yesterday in the Pacific West region. So there are days where we get a lot, and it's very encouraging. And I do feel like it's picking up some momentum now, that the word is spreading. So yeah, as Lee said, urgency is the name of the game.
Awesome. I'm seeing all of different committee members dropping contact information. Definitely scroll up because there have been a few. If you're looking for one near you, feel free to reach out to Stephanie or myself to get plugged in. We've got another meeting on August 2nd at 1:30 Pacific, 2:30 Mountain, I think. Um,
Yes, that
uh,
sounds great.
and we'll have after that, we've got a few more. We'll be holding these every 2 weeks. Next one is the same content. So invite folks who weren't able to make it tonight. And then after that, we're going to start talking about more specifics, and we're going to bring leaders from our Park Service and BLM chapters to come and talk with you all about what they've been doing in their chapters and building their unions. All right, you all. With that, have a good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lee.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Bye.
Yes, the recording. I'm gonna stop that now. And